So very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Isha Agarwal, your host, and I would like to render you all a very warm welcome to AIOC 2021. Without any further ado, let's get started with the session. I would request the chairperson to unmute and switch on the camera, starting with Dr. Ashu Agarwal. Over to you.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Isha.
Thanks.
Welcome everyone to this current concept session on astigmatism management at the time of cataract surgery. I'll just share my screen. Is it visible? And am I audible? Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. So I welcome all of you to the current concept topic, astigmatism management at the time of cataract surgery. I'm Ashu Agarwal, and I'll take you through the course. I'll give you a brief overview of the course and the co-instructors in this. So as we all know, cataract surgery is now a refractive surgery. With the premium IOLs coming in like multifocal, trifocal, accommodative, and toric IOLs, spectacle independence is expected by the patient and also desired by the surgeon. And target emmetropia is an important consideration with good, and the major components here, of course, are, apart from a good surgery, are good biometry to avoid post-op surprises. And of late, we've had some very good biometers coming in, and astigmatism control. Residual or astigmatism control may be considered as a procedural failure despite a good cataract surgery. So an overview of the course, the first topic would be by me, which is optimizing phaco-incisions to minimize astigmatism. The next talk would be by Dr. Sudhank Bharti, incisional techniques to reduce pre-existing astigmatism, LRIs and AK, manual and femtolaser based. Dr. Purendra Bhasin would be talking about toric IOLs, an elegant way to control astigmatism. And Dr. Saurav Chaudhary would talk about intraoperative image-guided systems for enhanced results in astigmatism control. I believe he may not be able to join us because of some personal issues. And if he doesn't, then Dr. Purendra Bhasin will be covering his talk. So starting with the first talk, optimizing phaco-incisions to minimize astigmatism. I have no financial interest in any of the devices, procedures, techniques mentioned. So let's take a historical perspective of things. The first steps. In fact, the first thing that to control astigmatism in cataract surgery was incision optimization, which was in terms of the incision axis, the axis it was placed on, the size of the incision, and the placement, that is anteriorly or posteriorly on the cornea. Next came the astigmatic keratotomy, which was a powerful but erratic tool, and then came relaxing incisions, which essentially moved posteriorly in the form of peripheral corneal relaxing incisions or limbal relaxing incisions. Opposite clear corneal incisions were a logical fallout for the cataract surgeon, which essentially comprised of two clear corneal tunnels 180 degrees apart on the steep meridian, with no additional instruments or surgical skill required. However, early post-operative care was required. Toric IOLs have been refined further and probably the most elegant and scientific way, but they have a downside that they are quite expensive, and in our country, it can be an issue for quite a segment of patients, and therefore the other methods cannot be undermined. So astigmatism control is still not an exact science. Please remember, it is still, so I would say that it's both science and an art, but it's not an exact science. And wound healing factor is the biggest bugbear which causes unpredictable results also, despite the best possible effort. So before we go on, let's look at the basic concepts in astigmatism control and the terminology used. There are certain astigmatism control parameters, like the size of incision, the distance of the incision from the center of cornea, the axis of incision, the coupling effect, and wound healing. We'll be looking at each of these in a little more detail. Also understand that astigmatism is a vector quantity with in terms of magnitude, which is measured by diameters of cylinder, and direction, which is axis in degrees. Then there's a very important concept called surgically induced astigmatism, or SI in short, which is essentially astigmatism resulting from a surgical procedure and can be used to effectively reduce pre-existing cylinder. So the first concept, size of incision. We know as the size increases, the surgically induced astigmatism increases. Now, why does it happen? Look at these schematic diagrams. This is a smaller size incision. This is a larger size incision. As the size increases, there's greater relaxation of tissue. There's greater relaxation and there's greater wound slippage. You see there's greater wound slippage and therefore more surgically induced astigmatism. So if you want to increase there's a astigmatism in a particular axis, you want to reduce it, increase the size of the incision, and it will reduce the incision, the astigmatism. Distance from the center of the cornea. Now look at the schematic. We all know that a lot of us would go for a temporal clear corneal incision. And the reason ascribed is that lesser astigmatism is induced. Now let's look at it why. We know that the temporal limbus is further away from the center of the cornea compared to the superior limbus. Closer the incision to the center of the cornea, greater is the induced astigmatism. Distance to the temporal limbus is more than the distance to the superior limbus, and therefore temporal clear corneal incisions, which are further away from the center compared to the superior or even the oblique clear corneal incisions, they cause lesser surgically induced astigmatism. Axis of incision. Now, corneal incision surgeries, they essentially flatten the meridian they're placed on, and they aim to flatten the steeper meridian by means of a tunnel or a relaxing incision. And corneal tunnels can be made temporally or on the steeper meridian, which is called on axis, which is a shortened version for on steeper axis. What it implies is on steeper axis you make the incision, so we call it on axis phacoemulsification. A very important concept called the coupling effect. Now, modification of one radius of curvature results in an opposite and equal effect on radius of curvature 90 degrees away. So this is the steeper meridian and this is the flatter meridian. Incision on the steeper meridian, we make the incision on the steeper meridian, would flatten the steeper meridian. This, if you make it here, this steeper meridian would become relatively flatter, and the flatter meridian would have an equal and opposite effect and would become relatively steeper. So this is how also we can control the astigmatism. Now, surgically induced astigmatism, as I said, is a vector quantity and is calculated by vector analysis. There's a bit of trigonometry involved, but fortunately we have some good calculators where we don't have to go into these details. I'll show you in the next slide. And suffice it to say that surgically induced astigmatism is a vector post-keratometry minus pre-keratometry in a vector quantity. So the various calculators are available, some of which I am given here: Haigis, Dr. Saurabh Sahni's, the Alcon Toric, and I'll use Dr. Sahni's to demonstrate an example. Let's assume the pre-op keratometry for a patient was 44 diopters at 90 degrees and 45 diopters at 180 degrees. That means it was steeper at 180 degrees by 1 diopter. And the post-op keratometry was 44.25 at 80 and 44.75 at 170. Please note the axis has changed. From the incision was a temporal incision placed on 180 degrees, but after 4 to 5 weeks, the post-op keratometry was at 170, the steeper, and 80. So the axis has changed. So had it been the same axis calculation, surgically induced astigmatism calculation would have been very easy. But what happens here? So let's look at this. I've already fed in the data in the interest of time. So here, if you see, can you see? This is pre-op keratometry and post-op keratometry. Pre-op, the axis is 44 and 90, 45 at 180. Post-op is 44.25 at 80 and 44.75 at 170. We get the surgically induced astigmatism, which is calculated as 0.56 at 99 degrees. So what happens if I change this value to 70 degrees? So you see that value changes from 0.7 to 104 degrees, 0.7 diopters at 104. So the value changes. So these calculators help us in knowing how we are performing, what a surgery is doing. And this is the way, sorry. I'm sorry, I think it just reverted back to the earlier one. Okay, so these are the toric calculators which can be downloaded. And coming to wound healing, as I mentioned, it is not well understood. However, some drugs like topical steroids may modify healing to some extent. So on-axis phacoemulsification is, in principle, is basically flattening of the steeper meridian. The axis of incision is placed on the steeper meridian, and if pre-op astigmatism is more than or equal to 0.5 diopters. If the pre-op astigmatism is less than 0.5 diopters, then I would suggest a temporal clear corneal incision. The placement is usually clear corneal. However, the incision can be moved anterior or posterior. Posterior would mean mid-limbal or posterior limbal to increase or decrease the induced astigmatism. Size is, we now do not want to go beyond 2.8 to 3 millimeters, sometimes 3.5 millimeters, especially if a temporal clear corneal incision is used. Because as you know, the temporal clear corneal incisions are more prone to ingress of fluid immediately post-op. Earlier, in fact, quite a few of us have done up to 5.5 millimeters and pushed in our PMMA lens and reduced the pre-existing astigmatism quite considerably. But it's not recommended because it causes unstable wounds and we have better techniques available now. However, posterior limbal and scleral limbal incisions can be relatively longer because they are more stable compared to clear corneal incisions. Opposite clear corneal incision is basically two standard phaco incisions or tunnels made 180 degrees apart along the steeper meridian. The advantage is that no additional surgical skill or instrumentation is required. Instruments used for clear corneal incision are the same as used for OCCI. And OCCI are penetrating, therefore require early postoperative care. The preoperative workup inclusion criteria are basically a patient should be properly screened for cataract surgery with astigmatism included up to 1.25 diopters. In fact, now it would be 1 to 1.25 diopters because we have some good toric IOLs and Indian manufacturers also coming in with good results, which are cheaper. Workup is as for a routine cataract surgery, and an important thing is to note the axis of astigmatism. Here, a word of caution because a lot of people are still doing manual keratometry. And the standard thing is when a workup in a high volume surgery setup is being done is you take the axis 90 and 180, but sometimes it may be an oblique axis. So take the measure the axis specifically by rotating the Joule Schiotz or Bausch and Lomb type keratometer if you're doing a manual one. And of course, auto keratorefs take a automatic reading. So an overview of the surgical procedure for on-axis phacoemulsification. The reference marks are made on the horizontal meridian in the sitting position to avoid cyclotorsion. On the table, steeper meridian are marked using an axis marker. The incisions are clear corneal, limbal, posterior limbal, depending on the pre-existing astigmatism. However, if you're doing a posterior limbal astigmatism, sometimes ballooning of conjunctiva can happen because of egress of fluid inside that. And therefore, a conjunctival peritomy should be done just behind the incision to prevent that ballooning, and otherwise it can be quite inirritant. Proceed with the phacoemulsification surgery as usual. You may increase the size of incision before or after IOL implantation, whatever is comfortable. But now we do not recommend above 3.5 millimeters, especially in clear corneal incisions. Surgical procedure for OCCI. Steps are the same till IOL implantation. With viscoelastic in the AC, OCCI is made 180 degrees opposite to the main incision, and the same principles of size, placement, clear corneal or limbal, and axis of incision would apply to the OCCI too. Irrigation aspiration is done, and it is recommended to hydrate the OCCI wound because they tend to leak. Because stromal hydration has not occurred, unlike the main incision. In the main incision, all the phaco and irrigation aspiration, there's a lot of stromal hydration happening. But here in the OCCI, it's a clean wound done at the end of the surgery. Therefore, stromal hydration should be done. Post-operative you follow your routine post-operative phacoemulsification follow-up. And in addition, careful observation of astigmatism should be done. These are the instruments basically required: the axis marker, the reference markers. A few very short videos. This is to show the marking of. And here, let me say that marking is not as critical as in toric IOLs, but still should give us a fair idea of what's happening. Here, the reference marks have been made in the sitting position. With the radial marker, we're marking the astigmatism. The steeper axis is 170 degrees. The incision is being made and the tunnel will be created. Next, I want to show that about what I said about conjunctival peritomy, localized conjunctival peritomy. So this is the incision. This is a posterior limbal, or rather almost a scleral incision. And when you make it, you're cutting the conjunctiva. The egress of the fluid when you're doing a phacoemulsification or irrigation aspiration can happen here, and it cause ballooning of the conjunctiva, which can be quite an irritant. So this is what I recommend. It really has helped me in a lot of situations, and you can proceed very well. And this may be required when you're doing a this may be particularly useful when you're doing a surgery where you want to induce minimum astigmatism. It is an almost astigmatically neutral cornea. Coming to the last clip of OCCI, basically the surgery has been completed. The intraocular lens is in position. This is the primary incision. You make 180 degrees opposite. Even a visual impression is good. You needn't do this. This was just to show how you do it. And a simple clear corneal tunnel is made opposite the primary incision. And this also is very effective in reducing the astigmatism. So there's sufficient literature comparing on-axis and temporal incisions and also OCCIs. There are a plethora of studies, but results are often not comparable because of different evaluation and analysis techniques used. Certain facts, however, do emerge that in temporal versus superior incision, there is lesser induced astigmatism with temporal incisions, and in temporal versus on-axis phacoemulsification, astigmatism correction is more with on-axis incision in most studies, and it is statistically significant in some studies. OCCIs enhance the astigmatism correction. There is a suggested algorithm that I follow and I would recommend to you, but it's by no means carved in stone. You would each have to experiment yourself if you're interested in this and figure out how these incisions work in your hand. But what I follow is that anything less than 0.5 diopters, which essentially means 0.25 because we measure in increments of 0.25, I do a temporal incision. Anything more than or equal to 0.5 diopters, I would go for an on-axis phacoemulsification. Now, how much do these incisions correct? For an incision of about 3 millimeters size, and when placed temporally, it corrects up to 0.25 diopters, definitely reduces the steeper axis, and sometimes up to 0.5 diopters. We can increase this correction by moving the incision anteriorly onto the clear cornea further, up to 0.5 diopters, and sometimes, very rarely though, up to 0.75 diopters. Superiorly, the effect is more, as I mentioned earlier, because the distance from the center to the superior limbus is less, and it's up to 0.75 diopters, and sometimes up to 1 diopters. OCCIs can cause an additional correction of 0.5 diopters to 0.75 diopters, depending on the parameters used. So with on-axis phaco, we are not very aggressive now because it causes unstable wounds if we increase the wound size or move too anteriorly into the clear cornea. And with a risk, therefore, a risk of endophthalmitis comes in. And we have better and more specific procedures like toric IOL available, so we don't need to do this. But there was a time when we were quite aggressive on this. OCCIs are a valuable tool to enhance astigmatism correction as a simple low-cost method done in the same sitting with just one additional step. However, the similar restraint of over-aggressiveness needs to be applied. In conclusion, on-axis phacoemulsification and OCCIs are a good option to deal with mild to moderate astigmatism of up to 1.25 to 1.5 diopters. We are not very aggressive now with other good options available. Need to get familiar with SIA calculator, and exact axis measurement is very essential here. Should develop one's own nomogram. Thank you for a patient hearing.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah. So Dr. Bharti is here, and I'll request him to go ahead with his talk. Incisional techniques to reduce pre-existing astigmatism, limbal relaxing incisions, and astigmatic keratotomy, manual and femto laser based. Dr. Bharti, let me introduce him, is a very high volume, very prolific, and a very well-known surgeon of Delhi. And he was the one who started LASIK in Delhi, and is a master of refractive and surgery and a pioneer of cataract surgery. And he also started his femto phaco in Delhi. And I welcome Dr. Bharti and thank you for being here in this course with us. Dr. Bharti, over to you. Dr. Bharti, you are on mute. Mute.
Here we are.
Okay.
So good morning, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Ashu, for giving me this opportunity to be there in your instruction course. And I'll share my screen. And so section during cataract surgery, or maybe after, whenever you want. So the most common system is limbal relaxing incision, and the most popular way, and eliminating visually significant corneal astigmatism is one of the key factors in successful multifocal and or accommodative IOL implant surgery. So when we're talking about removing all the astigmatism, it is actually in premium IOL. With a normal IOL, sometimes a small astigmatism doesn't matter because it gives you a decent kind of vision. 90% success in patient who had visually significant astigmatism with a set of LRIs. And this is done with the adjustment in the length, depth, location. And changes in the corneal astigmatism are achieved by flattening the steep. This is the most significant thing. And this is is achieved with a steep flattening the steep corneal meridian with a simultaneous increase in the corneal curvature in the flat meridian. And this is always a pair of incisions that corneal limbus just anterior to the vascular arcade. Should be moved as if as possible, thereby meeting the corneal astigmatism, and average corneal power should not be changed. This gives immediate recovery, excellent quality, and it is often combined with a cataract operation. So to correct the preoperative astigmatism, and leads to overall satisfaction with the patient. Now, NAPA is a Nichaman age and pachymetry adjusted intralimbal arcuate astigmatism. Is likely to give you the most accurate results and predictable results, and 90% of the depth of the cornea is used to give these eyes. The important factors are accurate peripheral corneal pachymetry and size and location according to age and keratometry, and ensure against corneal perforation, though the 90% depth is necessary. But if you press more or little bit of movement of the hand, and it can go up to 100%, that has to be, you have to be very, very careful. It's very simple. Like, I started my refractive surgery with radial keratotomy, so for me they are absolutely simple, but people are hesitant. More of the reason is that in a hand which is not so experienced, or initially if you want to do very Herculean, kind of aggressively, then the results are more aggressive, and there is overcorrections are possible. So this is very important to understand and to be very sure that you are giving a 90% depth, no more and no less. And this is the NAPA nomogram, which is there with the rule astigmatism from steep axis being 45 to 135, and against the rule astigmatism, which is from 0 to 44 and 136 to 80. So that we have to assess age, astigmatism, axis, everything is going to play. These are the variables one has to manage, and then accordingly we have to decide what kind of, we have to make a chart, and accordingly make a mark where you can do how much distance from the limbus, and mark and do it properly. So astigmatic keratotomy, the corneal transplant and the radial keratotomy both stimulated the development of astigmatic keratotomy, and can be useful for congenital or cataract or post-traumatic or corneal transplantation, or sometimes for enhancement of the PRK or LASIK cases as well. So there were 4 schools of thought, Modern, Lindstrom, Thornton's, and they have different kind of astigmatic keratotomy incisions. One like flag, the other like radial, the like LRIs, but much central, and in the cornea at about 8 millimeter optical zone. The farther you go, the effect is less. The closer you are to the center, the effect is more. So it depends how much you want. An incision is at 5 millimeter, and it will give you much more results and much more astigmatic correction. And majority of times it could be a smaller incision which can give you a larger results. So Nichaman developed an extensive nomogram, which I've already talked, and this is done at the time of cataract surgery. Coupling is the fact which I mentioned earlier. The coupling is that the opposite axis becomes, the first thing is the corneal relaxing incisions couple. So when they couple, that means that they enhance the effect of each other. And tangential or equivalent incision place, 2 events occur along the meridian of the incision and central to the incision. Flat of the cornea occurs, and commensurately one axis acting, the other deepening, so they join, and wonderfully, they give you a wonderful result. Indications of astigmatic keratotomy are in penetrating keratoplasty or any keratoplasty, LASIK, cataract, multifocal IOL, and accommodative IOL. And contraindications, of course, hyperopia, rheumatoid arthritis, dry eye, chemical burn, and diabetes, where the predictability is very poor. And one has to define what kind of astigmatism one is looking at. Basic rule I have already discussed: more depth, size, and distance from the center, and maximal incision length of about 80 degrees, but averagely it is about 40 degrees or so. So nominal age is 50 years, decrease the total amount of cut 1 degree for each year, and increase it 1 degree for each year below 50, because the effect is different in different age groups. So it's like 1 diopter by 80 degrees and 3 diopters with 160 degrees of incision, both the incisions combined. LRIs with femtosecond laser are precise, consistent, predictable. Post-operative, they can be, you don't open them, and open first incision, see what kind of astigmatism you're looking at, and then open the other one. So that is very important, that you can titrate your results. And laser nomograms are there for the LRIs, and arc incisions are adjustable, yeah. And you can monitor with the OCT while doing it, so they are very safe. And let me go forward. Intrastromal, and this is the manual RRI, which is done with the diamond knife. So you take a marker which is at 3, 5, and 8 millimeter, and you mark, with the ink, and then make it on the cornea. And here already a multifocal IOL is there inside the eye, and I know it's on the table itself that I am doing it. In this particular case, I don't want to put a small, very toric multifocal, which is slightly more expensive. So we can manage it with the with the knife, and we put the thickness of the cornea, and then we have already decided as to what is the axis and what is the mark, what is the size of the LRIs, and then we can mark it, do it. And when you're doing it with the forward movement, you get the maximum depth. When you do it with the backward movement, the depth is less. So mark going forward and maybe a couple of times forward and backward is good enough. And then to wash the debris should be washed. And once you have washed the debris, then from the incision, there is no possibility of growth inside the nest, epithelial nest developing inside. And that is how the manual LRI are performed. And you can see at the top, at about 1 o'clock, maybe 12:30, and bottom at about 9. And there might be some foreign body sensation and overcorrection. And then in cases of overcorrection, you can suture these cuts so that the correction is gone. And then undercorrection can be addressed easily by either deepening the incision or making another set of incisions, LRIs, at the same point. And late regression is very common. So 4 to 6 weeks after the procedure, you have to reassess and then see what you have achieved. Sometimes astigmatic keratotomy causes decrease in the best corrected vision because of the optical zone which is smaller, and there is irregular astigmatism which is created with that. Thank you for your kind attention, and thanks Dr. Ashu for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Bharti. I think we can go on to the next talk and then subsequently take up the questions or discuss. And the next talk is by Dr. Purendra Bhasin. In fact, he'll be covering the next two topics, toric IOLs, an elegant way to control astigmatism. And he would also be talking about intraoperative image-guided systems for enhanced results in astigmatism control, because unfortunately, Dr. Saurabh Chaudhary could not make it. And his topic would be covered by Dr. Purendra Bhasin. Over to you, Dr. Purendra. And Dr. Purendra Bhasin is a very high volume prolific surgeon from Gwalior and a very dear old friend. And he'll be talking about these two topics.
So, can you see my screen?
I can see, no, not yet. You'll have to share the screen. Dr. Bharti has stopped sharing.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ashu. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ashu, for giving me this opportunity. Till now, I think we have covered the basic thing and the need for correcting the astigmatism and the beautiful way depicted by Dr. Bharti, how we can do LRI and astigmatic keratotomy. So I will be covering the talk on toric IOLs, an elegant way to control the astigmatism. So we all know that the astigmatism is the important part of the visual refraction. So if it is not properly corrected, the chances of the quality of vision cannot be as crisp as it is without the astigmatism. This slide shows that even small amounts of astigmatism can impact the visual acuity. So even in this table, you can see very easily that this is with zero astigmatism, and at infinity, the patient's vision is 20/20. And even if there is a 0.05 diopter of astigmatism, the vision can come down to 20/25. And with 1 diopter of astigmatism, it will be as low as 20/40. So an astigmatism of 1 diopter or below is the aim at which we should target, and we should start correcting it. This is what I have learned from my, and if it is less than that, then we should not aim to correct it. So toric IOL, as the title is, it's an elegant way, and it is an established way of correcting and most scientific way of correcting the astigmatism. And various studies have been done till now, and we are doing it for last almost 12 to 15 years. And with the toric IOL, there is definite improvement in the visual outcomes. There is a better quality of vision. Less post-operative refractive astigmatism has been proven. High ratings for clarity of vision. Greater spectacle independence for distance. And there is a high patient satisfaction with toric IOLs after surgery. The good part is that, as has been depicted earlier and has been said earlier, that there is a regression with the other methods. Like if we correct it with the incisions, we cannot correct it more, or the more amount of astigmatism, more than 1 diopter of astigmatism cannot be corrected. Or if we do LRI or astigmatic keratotomy, we cannot correct more amount of astigmatism. The other important fact is that you are not sure of how much you are going to correct, because it depends on, there are multiple variable factors on which it depends the outcome, and there is definitely a regression of the result with the period of time. But with toric IOLs, it's not like that. Once you have corrected, it will always remain like the same, unless there is some pathology in the cornea which is causing or your patient selection has not been good. So this is what it is. My present scope will include a pre-operative assessment of the case, an intraoperative pulse, how we should do it successfully, and the post-operative surprise corrections. All these things I will be discussing in my talks. Points to ponder are how well is the case selection. We should understand the patient expectations, what the patient wants. As has been already said by my previous speaker, that this is an expensive mechanism as compared to other tools by which we are correcting. So when the cost is involved, the patient's expectations are also increased and enhanced. So for that, we need to do a proper counseling of the patient. A proper counseling, and we should always say and give a better or more results. This is what my way of working is. So do under promise. Say that maybe if the astigmatism is 2.5 diopters, 3.5 diopters, 4 diopters or so, then we should always explain to the patient maybe that you may require some number, but definitely we will correct it, and the major part of the astigmatism will definitely be corrected. A careful patient examination is very, very important, which we'll be discussing in the commencing talk. And in that, if there is a epithelial basement dystrophy, then we should treat it, and others related treatable corneal irregularities like pterygium or other things should be corrected before the surgery is planned, cataract surgery is planned or refractive surgery is planned, and at least 1 to 4 months should be given for the previous surgery for which for this maybe Salzmann nodule or maybe the epithelial basement dystrophy or maybe pterygium which has been corrected before. Then all these things should be done, and the interval of 1 to 3 to 4 months should be there in between. Treat ocular surface disorders and meibomian gland disorders before taking the patient for the surgery. Look for any other corneal disease like Salzmann nodule, any presence of scar, radial keratotomy, PRK or LASIK before, and any presence of the epithelial nest in the flap of the LASIK, etc. Coming to that accurate pre-operative testing of cylindrical power and nesting and axis. This is the most important thing. I remember we have to correct only, one should remember that we have to treat only the corneal astigmatism. So for that, many times I have seen there is a patient comes with the acceptance of 3 diopters, 4 diopters of astigmatism, but on doing a topography or doing a corneal astigmatism by keratometry, we see that the astigmatism is not that much. So look for other causes of astigmatism like which are more common is like lenticular astigmatisms due to subluxation, due to the nuclear sclerosis, due to the presence of irregular nuclear sclerosis, due to the presence of lenticonus, or many other things can be there, which can cause the astigmatism to the patient, effective astigmatism, but it is not a corneal astigmatism. The other important fact is that apart from the power, we have to look at the axis of the cylinder, and we recommend toric IOL in a case of pre-operative astigmatism which is more than 1 diopter. If it is less than 1 diopter, the previously enumerated methods are more effective and we should not do it. Do the toric IOL in such cases. A potential candidate for toric IOL would have regular symmetrical corneal astigmatism. But this is very, very important thing which has to be carried upon in the mind, because not all cases are the potential candidate for the toric IOL or astigmatism correction. Patients with irregular astigmatism will not improve with toric IOL, mind it, and rather it may worsen if there is a high irregularity. There are 3 steps for toric IOL implantation. One is accurate pre-operative testing of cylindrical power and axis. Second is the marking of the axis on the eye, both pre and intraoperatively. Then last is the this marking can be either digital or by manual method. which we'll be sharing in the commencing slide. And last will be the intraoperative alignment of the IL into the desired axis as has been given by the lens supplier. Any error in any of the steps mentioned above will lead to poor results or residual astigmatism. Coming to the first step, that is the pre-operative planning. We should perform keratometry and make sure there is a corneal astigmatism. Perform topography. So perform keratometry by various tools like automated keratometry, or by the manual keratometer, or maybe the IOL master, or the digital or marking of digital calculation of the IL power, which will tell us about the correct axis and power of the astigmatism. Now, what I have seen is that the Lenstar, IOL Master, and other now good gadgets have come, which tell us about the keratometry. Some give us over result, like in Lenstar give us 0.10 to 0.25 diopters of overcorrection of the overestimation of the astigmatism. But definitely the axis given by these tools are very, very reliable. Then we should perform topography. In all these cases, we should confirm the astigmatism axis by topography. Topographer will inform us the location of the steep meridian and its axis, and if the astigmatism, whether the astigmatism is regular and whether the astigmatism is symmetrical. These all things will tell us, and lastly, it will tell us about the presence or absence of dry eye. So all these things are important to be seen when we do topography. Perform a posterior corneal measurement with the Scheimpflug imaging tools like Pentacam and Galili. We can rely on manual, or we don't have all these tools available with us. So we can do a manual or automated refractive keratometries, and they are reliable also. But we should check it again, we should confirm it again, and on another day when the cornea has not been touched by any instrument or by any medicine. Or the IL Master or Lenstar for the magnet. We can use IL Master or Lenstar, which are really very, very reliable for the magnitude of the cylinder. Before moving ahead, we must confirm it with multiple measurements. This is very important, and in toric IL, it is all the more important. For 1.25 diopters of with the rule astigmatism, we may use on-axis incisions rather than a toric IOL. This is because if we use on-axis or a paired incision or couple incisions on opposite axis on the steep meridian, that will correct to up to 0.5 to 0.75 diopters of astigmatism. This much as we may get it correction. So with the rule astigmatism, which is planned that we should undercorrect with the rule astigmatism, this should be kept in mind, and overcorrect or fully correct against the rule astigmatism. So with this 1.25 or 1 diopters of with the rule astigmatism, we may use on-axis incision rather than a toric IOL. When results from two instruments do not agree at the axis and magnitude of astigmatism, if reading from manual K and Pentacam topographer are not within 10 degrees, then repeat both after calling patient again. And if still they are not varying, or they are not coinciding, there should not be a difference or variation in excess of 5 to 10 degrees. This is beyond this, it is not acceptable. Use the magnitude of astigmatism of both manual or automated K and axis derived from the topography or Pentacam. So if they are not matching, then you should defer toric IOL in such a case when two readings or multiple readings from the two instruments, they are not matching in terms of axis and the magnitude of cylinder. Coming to the another important aspect of seeing the corneal astigmatism, the role of posterior corneal curvature cannot be undermined or underestimated. Posterior cornea is vertically steep in about 87% of the eyes, and this causes a net against the rule astigmatism, as the back cornea is a minus cylinder or a concave lens. minus lens or a concave lens, and this causes an opposite effect. So this causes a net against the rule astigmatism. This results in overcorrection of the with the rule astigmatism by 0.5 diopters and undercorrection of against the rule astigmatism by 0.3 diopters. So therefore, slightly undercorrect with the rule astigmatism and fully or slightly overcorrect against the rule astigmatism. And if we are using posterior accurate, ideal is to use accurately measured posterior corneal astigmatism by Pentacam or Galili or any Scheimpflug imaging instruments. Then surgically induced astigmatism has been covered by Dr. Bharti also. It depends on incision length and the incision location. There is a patient variability and measurement variability both. So patient variability depends on the how much deep you have done and what is the density of the cornea or tensile strength of the cornea, which various instruments can tell us, but usually it is not much reliable. So what is the best way to calculate surgically induced astigmatism has been very well said by Dr. Ashu also. We should use a siacalculator.com site, or we may use Saurabh Chaudhary's site to calculate our surgically induced astigmatism. And one should clearly know, and it is paid. My surgically induced astigmatism is 0.25 diopters to 0.30 diopters. So in my cases, I am having this much of astigmatism, and you should calculate on same type of incision length, same width of incision, which you mark, and on various lens types, and on only one simple particular type of lens which you are using, and at least 30 to 100 cases if you register, then you will get a good estimation of the surgically induced astigmatism. Coming to another important aspect, which is a centroid value in calculating surgically induced astigmatism. In this particular this thing, single or double angle plots will give us the pre-operative astigmatism calculation. It takes into account vector magnitude and orientation. Centroid is the average of these vectors and represents the mean surgically induced astigmatism. Based on averages, a 0.10 diopter may be a good estimate of average centroid induced astigmatism based on a 2.4 millimeter clear corneal incision. The recent Barrett formula takes into account the centroid value in calculating the surgically induced astigmatism. The Barrett-Toric algorithm is very good and a superior refractive predictability versus other formulas and nomogram over, as you can see, when we use the other formulas, the Barrett formula calculator gives us almost 75% prediction of residual astigmatism, and there is a superior refractive predictability as compared to other formulas. So I use Barrett-Toric formula for calculation of the IOL power and plan of toric IOL. Coming to the marking, reference marking on the eye. This could be done in a manual way. As you can see here, we can do it on slit lamp. Same patient can be asked to sit on the keep a chin on the slit lamp, and keeping the Hackstride slit lamp in a horizontal meridian. So you can mark with the free hand on an horizontal meridian at 3 and 9 o'clock position, keeping the chin and head straight, and touching the forehead to the strip of the slit lamp, and asking the patient to look straight into the right ear, into the ear of yourself, and this will focus, and this will give us a marking, as you can see here. And this is on these are the marks which we have made pre-operatively, and this is the mark which we have to make at 90 degree. Or we can have a bubble, we can use a bubble marker, freehand bubble marker. This is, and the bubble should be within 2 lines here. So this is another way of marking. and maybe we can use electronic preoperative marker like this. Coming to the digital marking systems which are available from Alcon, which is by the name of Verion. I don't have any financial interest in any of these methods or products shown over here. Or maybe there is a Callisto from Zeiss, and this will, in this, a patient is asked to sit pre-op, and the pre-op registration of the patient is done. And marking, it is not, there is no physical marking, but it records it. The image of the patient's vessels are recorded, and this will guide us. And by this, the patient's landmarks are guided, and accordingly, when the patient is in a supine position from the sitting position, it takes into account the changes in variation in the marking. Then comes we have to send the axis and the amount of cylinder and the IL power to the company, axle length and all to the company, and or maybe we can do it ourselves. And this tells us that the patient is having plus 3.22 diopters of cylinder at 94 degree axis, and the recommended IL power is T6 model of Alcon IL power, which will give us a residual cylinder of 0.16 diopters. And this will tell us what will be the axis of incision, where you are going to place the incision, which is in this particular case at 0 degree, and which is the line which tells us where the cylinder or the lens axis has to be aligned with. So this is a case where there is a patient is pre-operative marking, as you have seen. I have done a cataract surgery. I'm not showing that part. And after polishing of the posterior capsule thoroughly, I don't have any financial interest in this. A lens is placed inside the bag. This is a toric lens, and it is a no visco implantation, which is very, very helpful in implanting the lens, because with this, the change in the axis in the immediate post-op period is not there if we leave some amount of viscoelastic in the bag. So now with the bimanual technique, I'm rotating the lens, and this is the axis, intended axis at which the lens has to be placed. And I've placed it here, and it is accurately been placed at the particular meridian, as you can see in this particular fixing of the image. So manual and digital marking, there are various studies which tell us that the digital marking group shows statistically significant better refractive outcomes as regard the mean deviation from target astigmatism, which was 0.10 plus 0.08 diopters, and all eyes were within 0.5 diopters of the targeted induced astigmatism. The digital marking group showed statistically significant better results as regards the mean post-operative toric IOL misalignment measured by the slit length, which was 2.4 degrees plus minus 1.96 degree. The reported mean post-operative toric IOL misalignment ranged from 2.5 degree to 4 diopters. So this was the difference. And another case wherein the axis was 64 degree where the lens has to be placed in digital marking, and incision was at 180 degree, as you can see here. So we have made an incision at 180 degree, and we are going to implant the lens at 64 degree axis. This is the axis where we have to align the lens at which. And dear friends, it is not necessary that we all should have a toric, the digital marking system. You can see the image here, and the astigmatism pre-operative was 2.23 diopters, and after post-operatively it has come down to 0 diopters, and there is a lens is perfectly at 60 degree as was planned. And this is how we do intraoperative marking of the by the Mendel's marker. These are the marks which we used to do earlier, and this is how the lens is being aligned. And this is without the digital marking, which we used to do 10 years back. And in this particular case, there was a residual astigmatism of 0.50 diopters at 180 degree. So top considerations in success of toric IOL prediction is the topographer is recommended to confirm the location of the steep meridian. If it is regular astigmatism and symmetrical astigmatism, we should consider using a second instrument to maybe in the form of topographer or Varian itself, or maybe the Pentacan or another IOL calculating machine to validate the location of the steep meridian. Use keratometer, biometer to calculate power difference between the principal meridian. Topography to confirm the power difference. Include posterior corneal astigmatism in calculations by using an advanced calculator. Optimize surgically induced astigmatism, a centroid value of 0.10. Consider whether overcorrection to with the rule astigmatism is warranted for patients with against the rule astigmatism and oblique astigmatism, and try no visco IOL implantation for better results. Coming to the correction of the residual astigmatism, if it comes, so which can be due to the incorrect IOL power calculation at the corneal plane. There is a role of posterior corneal curvature which has not been taken into consideration in calculation of the IOL power and cylindrical power. There is disaccordance in cylinder axis between various instruments, and still we have gone ahead and we have planned a toric IOL. And surgery did not go your way, like poor creation of incision, etc. Incision formation was not correct, and sometimes there are unexplained reasons for the presence of residual astigmatism. So we should understand the cause of residual refractive error or residual sphere, whether it is refractive error or cylindrical error. So if it comes to be spherical or cylinder or a spherocylinder, what kind of refractive error is? So if it is spherical, then their IOL power calculation is incorrect. If it is purely cylindrical, then your calculation of cylindrical power is not correct. If it is spherocylindrical, then you should think that whether you should dilate, check after dilatation whether the IOL axis is on the meridian in which we have planned, get the formula from the case sheet and see whether the IOL is placed on the intended axis where we have implanted during the surgery. Sometimes the haptic are both is not in the bag, and that can also lead to this. Now in this particular case, we have planned preoperative Zeiss Acrylisa toric IOL, and the intended axis was 160 degree where we have to plan, and the incision location was 0 degree. Sorry. So we have done the surgery, and our axis at incision location is 180 degree. This is a plate haptic IOL. So IOL is placed in the bag, and we are finally placing it. This is a toric trifocal IOL, and axis of placement is 160 degree. As you can see with the Varian, we are aligning it at 160 degree. It is perfectly aligned at the end of the surgery. So after the incisions are hydrated, we check it again. And now, very next day, the patient vision was 6/6, and the patient didn't have any complaint. But after a period of 10 days, patient came to us, returned to us after a period of 1 week, and with the vision of 6/24, and the refraction was plus 0.5 diopter with minus 2.5 diopters of cylindrical, power at 75 degree axis, and vision was improving to 6/9 and N6. So this is on dilatation. We saw that the patient's IOL has been displaced. The axis has been, the IOL has been rotated. So we waited for the initial incisions to get stabilized and if there is any other reason, then after 1 month, we took the patient to the OR and repositioned the IUL. As you can see here, the IUL now is at 90-degree meridian. This is the 0 and 180-degree meridian. The IUL was at almost at 90-94 degree. So with the help of spatula, by filling the anterior chamber with viscoelastic, appropriate viscoelastic, I am rotating the lens, dialing the lens, and we have to place it at 160 degree. So we can, because this is a plate haptic lens, so we can rotate in opposite direction also, anti-clockwise direction. Now, maybe there was a residual viscoelastic behind the lens, which was the reason why the lens rotated, or maybe we might have overhydrated the anterior chamber. So there is a chance that the lens gets rotated in the back. So important thing which has to be kept in mind when we close the incision, when we hydrate the incision, that the chamber should not be very deep. The eye should not be overhydrated, and the incisions, there should not be leaking incisions. Otherwise, there is a chance of shallowing of the anterior chamber, and the lens can get rotated in the immediate postoperative period. So, friends, if there is still astigmatism is present, we can go to this site and check for the residual refractive error, and if we have to enter the amount of residual refractive error and the IOL model which we have used, and it will give us the new toric IOL axis if it is incorrectly calculated beforehand, the new toric IOL axis, and then we can realign the lens at this particular IOL and give good quality of vision after rotating the IOL to the normal axis. So other options are, we can use excimer laser correction with the LASIK laser or PRK, or we may use LRI, which are less reliable. Finally, to conclude, toric IOL for 1 diopter and above against the rule astigmatism can be considered, and with 1 to 1.25 diopters of with the rule astigmatism, I use on axis or paired incision. Otherwise, more than 1.25 diopters of with the rule astigmatism, we can plan for toric IOL. Intrastromal LRI or arcuate incisions by femtosecond laser is another good option for less than 1 diopters or 0.75 diopters of astigmatism. There is less dry eye, wound gap, and better predictability, which we can convert into penetrating LRI or arcuate incision. Adding toric IOL to your surgical armamentarium is the most effective way to enter into refractive cataract surgery and making your patient get the wow factor and give you blessings and good wishes. Thank you. Thank you, Ashu.
Thank you, Purendra, for an excellent and a comprehensive talk. And it's good you could cover Dr. Saurabh Chaudhary's part also in terms of imaging. And I don't see any questions from the audience here. So anyway, we can discuss a few issues, a few things for the benefit of the viewers. So a word about what you very rightly pointed out, that the ocular surface, when we are measuring preoperatively, the astigmatism, the cylinder, the axis, the ocular surface should be very, very clear. I mean, there should be no dry eye. Very often what happens is, when we've done a workup, we've done an applanation torometry, and all the dilation has been done on the same sitting, we are doing a keratometry, autoref keratometry or any other keratometry to know the astigmatism and then do the biometry. So that can often go wrong, as you rightly pointed out. And we should ensure that the ocular surface is pristine when we are doing, because these are premium lenses and there's a lot of expectation from the surgeon also, and also from the patient, and they are a costly proposition also for the patient, so the expectations are more. So usually we tend to do the biometry in the same sitting for most patients when they come in, but in these cases, toric IOL, especially if you're beginning out, I would recommend that you call the patient for a second visit, or if you know that the patient has already come with a complaint, before we dilate, before we do the applanation, at least do the proper keratometry. If you want to do it in one sitting, if it's a high volume center, you don't want to call the patient again. So that's one. What's your view on that, Purinder?
You are absolutely correct. I usually do this way. Multiple checking of the axis and magnitude of cylinder is very, very important before planning the case or before posting the case for toric oil. So I think these are very important considerations which has been highlighted for the good or expected results of the toric oil or any astigmatism correction.
And like you rightly pointed out, I'd just like to highlight that again. At least use two methods to verify the axis and the astigmatism, because one method may not be very accurate, or there could be chances of error. So that again is a very important consideration. So in terms of the range, so now the audience would have seen a variety of surgeries, starting with incision placements, the simplest, on-axis phacoemulsification, OCCIs, LRIs, and of course the toric IOLs. So you also summarized it, but let's reiterate the fact again, the range. So one, of course, the important consideration which has come in the last 4-5 years is the posterior surface astigmatism, the posterior corneal surface astigmatism, which changes the game. But even otherwise, even if you do not have access, for a lot of people would not have access to a pentacam or a dual Scheimpflix system to know the posterior surface. So in case that is the issue, I would like to go over the ranges, because a lot of people would not have access. So how do we go about it? So I'll just say what I usually practice, and I'd like your input. So in case we don't have posterior surface and we just have the measured astigmatism, so the range, I think the gray zone is 0.75 diopters to 1.25 diopters. 1.5 diopters, definitely go for a toric IOL, no doubt about it. A lot of people are doing toric IOLs at 0.75, especially the fact that now we have cheaper Indian lenses also, which are doing quite well. And so the option of giving a toric IOL to a patient, even with a lower astigmatism of 0.75, is there. So under 0.75, I would definitely not do a toric IOL. The gray zone is 0.75 to 1.25 diopters. And off late, I'm wearing as one diopter as the cutoff zone, in case I don't have posterior corneal evaluation. So that is my thing, that 1.25 is the very, very upper limit that I would do a non-toric. I would do incisional based surgeries, but now I would at 1.25 also I would tend to go towards toric. But under 1 or up to 1, I would prefer, especially if it's with the rule astigmatism, I would prefer to go with a incisional based surgery. Your views on that, Purinder?
I fully agree. I do the same. Even in multifocal IOL, if the astigmatism is below 1 diopters, say if it is 0.75 or 0.80 diopters, and so I will go for incision at the steep meridian, wherever it is. I will try to accommodate in the surgery and make the incision at the steep meridian. Another important aspect is that which I want to highlight here, and I have explained in the talk also, that with the rule astigmatism, as you have, our discussion is on the posterior corneal astigmatism, because the posterior corneal surface is a minus lens. So in majority of the cases, 85 to 90% of the cases, we see that there is a induced there is a with the rule astigmatism there is a negative astigmatism on the posterior side, which adds on if it is a with the rule astigmatism. So what I feel is that if there is a with the rule astigmatism, we have to undercorrect it. And if it is, and that this undercorrection should be between 0.25 to 0.50 diopters. And if it is against the rule astigmatism, I will overcorrect it by 0.15 diopters or 0.2 diopters, or maybe I will fully correct it. Even if it is 0.25 diopters left over, then it doesn't make much difference. And you should always consider your surgically induced astigmatism while calculating the toric IOL power. This is very, very important.
Yes, very true. So, in other words, if I were to put it a little simply, is that with the rule astigmatism is a little more tolerant for non-toric IOL surgeries, for incision-based surgeries. We can go ahead with incision-based surgeries for with the rule astigmatism. Whereas against the rule astigmatism, it is as it is, surgical correction in against the rule astigmatism is much lesser compared to with the rule astigmatism with the incision-based surgeries. The threshold for toric IOL has to be lower. You would go for a toric IOL much earlier with a lesser astigmatism, with the rule against the rule astigmatism. So when you have against the rule astigmatism, the chances of doing a toric IOL are more, and probably the results would be better. So that's one factor. With the rule, you could attempt incision-based surgeries, especially definitely up to 1 diopter, as Dr. Purendra highlighted in his talk, and sometimes even up to 1.25, although we are veering towards 1. Definitely, if it's a 0.75 with the rule astigmatism, do not consider a toric IOL. You can, but I think it might be an overkill. So that's one thing. Another thing, Dr. Purendra, that I'm seeing is a lot of younger colleagues have hesitation in starting with toric IOLs. Of course, because the expectations on the patient are more, and they feel that if it rotates, like you showed in your case, the rotation was there, and you being such an elegant and experienced surgeon, you could handle it well. And there was a rotation of almost 85 degrees. So there are two aspects to this question here. One is how to allay those fears and encourage people to go for toric IOLs, because they feel if it rotates, the effect goes away. And then we have all these things like 1 degree of rotation causes 3 degrees, and 90. So those things scare people. But here I'd like to highlight that my observation is that even up to 5 to 10 degrees of rotation is very, very forgiving. The results do not suffer much. You may have a astigmatism of 0.5 or 0.75, which the patient tolerates very well, and the patient is very happy using and with those results. So I think even a 5 to 10 degree rotation should not be worrisome, and I don't even feel that 5 to 10 degree rotation should even be attempted to be corrected, because it is quite forgiving.
It is forgiving. And I think if it give the right perspective, that there is no need of going for digital marking system for an expensive tool for starting the toric IOL implantation. I don't think that is required. By means of you can experience and you can do with the help of markers, you can definitely go ahead and start doing a toric IOL. There should not be any hesitation.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the important thing here is, of course, as Dr. Purendra rightly pointed out, pre-op calculation and measurements of the astigmatism. No doubt about that. If you don't get the axis and the magnitude of astigmatism right, you're going to go wrong. The second is the pre-op reference marking, which I feel what I have come to do after all these robo markers, all the various marking systems are there, that I make 2 horizontal marks by making the patient sit on the slit lamp. I just take a 26 gauge needle, ink it with the marker pen, and make 2 impressions or other indentations along with an impression at 0 and 180 degrees. On the slit lamp, the advantage is you can bisect it equally. The cornea is bisected into 2 hemispheres, superior and inferior, and you can have graticules also. And I mark at 0 and 180 degrees, and the impression is there. So there's a little epithelial defect which is also created there, a linear defect, and the impression there is there, and it stays for a long time. And using that, I feel that once on the table, when you make the axis, intended axis mark is made, you can very well control the situation. And digital systems like Varion and Callisto, if you have it, it's great, but they can be done. I've also seen a recent trend that some of these mobile devices have come in. There's a app for Android, I think Patwardhan's app, and Dr. Cox's app on iPhone. They are also performing quite well, where you can take those images and do that. So I think Varion, if you have it, or Callisto if you have it, or Aura if you have it, it's great, but that should not be a deterrent. One. Number two, any rotation can be easily dealt with if it's significant, but 5, 10, even 15 degree rotation sometimes can be left, and the patient is quite happy, and these lenses are quite forgiving. Question that I have, Dr. Purendra, is that you have such a vast experience of various platforms. We have the plate haptic platform in toric IOLs. We have the regular haptics, which we have, but then there's a range of haptics there from the Alcon's flexing, the L-shaped ones, and the other companies which they have the routine ones. What would you recommend, at least for a beginner? Because I think they all perform well with occasional rotation in all, and with occasional corrections required, rotations are required in all of those. But if one were to begin, and I know there's no financial interest for either of us, what would you recommend? Which is the
I think
most stable?
all are stable because I have used this is Zeiss also, and the other hydrophobic acrylic lenses. So they are really in this particular case it has happened, and this is this is the only case, and one in hydrophobic acrylic lens from IQ also, Alcon also it has happened. But usually there must be some other reason. Maybe the size of the eyeball or size of the bag is larger, or maybe we have left over the viscoelastic, which is, or maybe we have overhydrated. Although we take all these precautions, but once it has been dialed back, it doesn't produce any. I have not come across that I have to explant the lens because it is happening again and again. So this is one thing which I want to share with you. And but the results from all the companies and all the lens types are same and more. But what I personally feel is that hydrophobic lenses, because of the tackiness, it sticks to the posterior capsule and anterior capsule fast and on table itself, and maybe it remains better over there because of the tackiness of the material which is there, that it adheres to the posterior and anterior capsule, and there is less chance of rotation. Because if you remember, if I remember when doing a rotation of the lens, hydrophobic lens is difficult, or explantation of hydrophobic lenses are difficult, because you have to first separate the lens from the anterior posterior capsule. Maybe I use a hydro dissection kind of a thing, but I use a fluid wave and separate it, and this is with, and then we rotate it, otherwise we may damage the zonules and the lens back. So hydrophobic lenses should be better, what I feel is, but all these lenses are really, plate applique lenses are also good.
Yeah, so that's been my experience too. I think hydrophobic primarily because, not because of the design per se, but primarily because of material use, the tackiness, they adhere better, and what works against them for delayed explantation or rotation is probably an advantage in toric lenses, where it helps them stick and stay in place if it's been implanted properly. Having said that, yes, all the models, all the platforms are performing equally well, and there should be no fear. If you're used to a certain form of a certain type of lens, I think you can go ahead with that. If you're using a particular plate haptic multifocal lens and now you want to use toric also, you can continue with that. You can continue, and once in a while you would have to rotate. That should not be a deterrent. That should not put any fear. You should not fear that. And so that, having said that, any model, just start, and rotations should not worry you.
But I will not go for hydrophilic lenses, which are some companies they have in hydrophilic lenses, but I have not used it because I have a fear that it is, because they are already a smaller size and the shape is such that it can rotate. So can you excuse me, Ashu, if there is no other question?
I think we've covered everything in this course. And I'd like to thank you, Purendra, Dr. Bharti, for being here, and all the participants and the hall coordinators for helping us. And thank you for being here. If in case there are any questions, you could probably email me or Dr. Purendra or any of the speakers for specific answers. Thank you very much. Thank you, Isha. Thank you, Timer, Dr. Praveen, and the CSC team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor, so much. Thank you.
Thank you.